This is a journey into sound. A journey which along the way will bring to you new color, new dimension, new values, and a new experience.
Welcome to the G-Spot Podcast. I'm your guide, Katie Silcox, bringing you your weekly self-love soundbite. Join us for conversations around sex, spirit, and all things self-care. All things self-care. All things self-care.
This is a journey into sound.
Uno, dos, tres, cuatro.
You are a G-Spot Podcast with Katie Silcox.
Hey G-Spot listeners, this is Anne-Marie. Today's episode is the audio from our most recent free spirit session webinar with Katie called How We Move Forward Spiritually. We give these free live webinars from time to time. If you would like to be able to sit in and participate in the next one, go to theshaktischool.com and make sure to join our mailing list. You can use any of the email forms on our website. Also note that 2021 Ayurveda school session is filling up. We start in 6 weeks. If you'd like more information, go to theshaktischool.com and click on Ayurveda at the top. Our first class is January 13th. Enjoy the show.
What I really would love for you guys to kind of allow for yourself today is just to really experience this lecture. And if a question comes up, just write it down and we'll get to it at the end of the class, so that today less an intellectual experience and an intellectual enterprise, this really gets to be a practice experience for you guys. And so that's my hope, that as we said in the title, right, that this could be a step in the right direction for all of us on how we begin to move forward spiritually from a time in our world that has been, to say the least, chaotic. So let's start. So what I'd like for you to do is go ahead and just let your awareness enter into a relationship with the body itself. Take your hand and just put it on your heart. And as you do that, I want you to really feel the experience of contact. Feeling the experience of contact. Your physical skin of your hand. And then maybe even you put the other hand and you start to press a little bit and you give it some weight, and you can already hear how the sound of my voice starts to change as I begin to enter into relationship, me to me, with the part of me that, as I put my hand on myself, something soothing that is innate and both primal and spiritual begins to inform my experience. And maybe a breath starts to release. And as you close your eyes, maybe, or you can keep them open, you may start to notice there is a signal in our biology that is always sending us signals of grace. No matter who you are, no matter what you're going through today, no matter what you've been through in your past or in your childhood, or no matter what you're so afraid of going forward into, your body and this prana, this Holy Spirit, this angel, this chi, this life force that lives inside of us, this biology is always sending us signals of ease, unless we need to be running away from something, right? And so feel, even though you may feel other signals coming through, feel how your body is right here, right now, in this moment, sending you a signal of safe enough, good enough, merciful enough. And for my body, I just feel this gentle rocking starting to happen. And then tune the attention very strategically right now to the signal that's healing. Tune to the signal that's healing. Good, and now keep that awareness, and we'll slowly start to open the eyes. And now I feel a little more here with you guys. Maybe you feel a little more here. And together we are, right? Now 184 of us and many more that will watch this later, and just getting the sense there are 184 beings right now that signed up for a course at 2 p.m. on a Saturday. Because the title intrigued you, the title pulled you in. That's what a title's meant to do. And the title was How We Move Forward Spiritually. How do we take the detritus of 2020? And as the Ayurvedic teachings say, we take cow dung, right? That may be what your 2020 felt like. And we burn it. And we let ourselves be baptized by fire. And from that baptismal by fire, this new thing starts to emerge out of the thing in your life that was the hardest thing, out of the things in our culture that are the darkest things, out of the things in our family lives that have been thorns in our side, out of the pain and even disease that the body can so easily go through during this time of imbalance, that those things start to become the very fuel for a transformation that turns us into who the divine would long for us to be. And if I didn't have that worldview, I don't know who I would be right now. And so leaning into what our forefathers and foremothers said for hundreds and thousands of years, in my opinion, is the only hope. And taking the eagle eye vision of our foremothers and forefathers and saying to those foremothers and forefathers, thank you, thank you, thank you, ancestors, but y'all didn't always get it right. And so we're going to take what works. That's one of the definitions of Tantra. We're going to take what's elegant and what's efficient and what's attuned with the natural world. And we're going to elevate it, and we're going to make it appropriate for 2021. And we're going to even take the sins of our ancestors, and we're going to transform and transmute them so that our children and their children can live better lives. No matter where you're from, no matter what origin you have, no matter the color of your skin, your gender, all of us hold some things to be very common. And one of them is we want our children to have better lives than we did. We want something different for our children. And so today's lecture is going to be some basics and hopefully some experiences and some inspiration that can really spur us forward for this next stage. And I think we can all kind of feel some sort of shift has occurred. I want to start with a quote from Christian women who wrote My Bright Abyss. Thus we love within the lines that experience is drawn for us. We create out of impulses that are familiar. And if we are honest with ourselves, exhausted. What might it mean to be drawn onto meanings that, in some profound and necessary sense, shatter us? This is what it means to love, the inner and outer urgency of it, the mysterious and confused agency of it. All love abhors habit. So we begin with that. All love abhors habit. So often what will lead us to this greatest of love is the very thing that shatters us. So I want to introduce, for some of you, it won't be unfamiliar, this concept in neurophysiology and the healing arts of trauma, right? And I think all of us can agree that this has been sort of a collective reckoning on the traumatic experience, that there is a sense in which the unconscious or subconscious material has had no choice but to bubble up to the surface. One of my dear friends, Scott Blossom, says, if you don't wake up every single morning this year with just a little bit of that sense of urgency or grief or fear in your heart, you're not paying attention, right? The Christian mystic tradition says, the Lord is near to those who have a broken heart, right? The crack is how the light gets in. And so this theme of having our heart broken is, for me, very relevant to my experience, both personally as well as what I'm observing as a very clairsentient being of the collective experience in 2020. And how do we take that and move forward? No matter your age, no matter your gender, no matter the color of your skin, you are welcome here and you belong here. And I would even go so far as to be very brave to say, no matter your political ideology, you're welcome here. That this new vision for 2021 really is asking us to do this, and that is to weave back together what has been fully ripped apart. And that we could enter into a level of bravery and safety in this new year that's to come. So essentially all of us have been under, especially if you've signed up for this workshop or you're attracted to the Shakti school, you're probably a sensitive person, right? And because of that sensitivity, many of us have been asked on a collective level to come face to face with powerful emotions. And unfortunately, fortunately, the way our brain is wired is that the emotions of fear, the emotions of panic, the emotions of grief, the emotions of confusion, and many of the things that I would say the mainstream news media really uses to push forward narratives are the very emotions that get our attention the most. Our brain literally wires in traumatic material way easier than any other form of material. And in nature, that totally makes sense, right? If something really bad happened to you or your ancestors in nature, you're going to want to remember that so you don't eat that thing again, or you don't go down in that holler where that beast could eat you, right? And so on a natural level in the wild, this completely makes sense, you guys. What we're also seeing through research now into the scientific method, which the ancients have known for hundreds, if not thousands of years, is that these traumas are passed along intergenerationally. And we can see that if you traumatize a mouse, we can see 7 generations down, which curiously is exactly what our native elders in the United States told us. 7 generations from now, that mouse baby would feel that pain of the mama, great, 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 great grandmother, right? It's amazing. And so what nature is almost asking us to do is not only take responsibility for ourselves and our own personal experience, but for all of these generations to come. So we're all familiar with that feeling of being in the matrix of the trauma vortex. If you're not, you're very lucky, and you've probably been living in a world without social media, which essentially can have a very real possibility of exacerbating this. And if you haven't seen the documentary called The Social Dilemma, I would highly recommend that for you as a spiritual experience to watch, because essentially it's telling us that we're all receiving very different narratives that actually polarize us into differing groups and really invite a sense of division in our world. So on the other side, we'll put that here, this trauma vortex that's not just your past experience and your childhood and the abuses that you may have undergone and the bad experiences and harmful experiences and the insults your biology has taken on, but also the collective, right? And so even if you personally haven't experienced X, Y, or Z, you do not exist in a bubble, and we'll get to that in just a moment. You exist within a sphere of the everything and everyone. Now, on the other side over here, we have what's called the healing vortex. And my face lights up as I start to think about it. And the healing vortex, also known as the resiliency vortex or a vortex of thriving, the healing vortex also has its own energy and its own momentum. And the things that exist in this, like for me, it's like my relationship with my friends, you know, when my mama puts her hand on my heart and hugs me, when someone looks me in the eye and says, you know what, I really get that. That totally makes sense. I'm on your team. Being in relationship with a puppy dog, you know, the community of friends that I have that, you know, if I'm going through something tough, they say, can I come over and cook something for you or clean your house? You know, the healing vortex of having a present and loving therapist in your life, or grandpa or grandma or mother or auntie or best friend, you know, that whole realm. As I'm saying those things, the healing vortex also is the natural world and being able to interface with that experience of nature. These are all things that exist in the healing vortex. Now, the things that exist in the trauma vortex typically tend to be very fast. And the things that exist in the healing vortex tend to be a lot slower. We currently find ourselves in the period of time in Ayurvedic medicine where things by nature start to speed up. It's called the Vata time. So our society reinforces the speed. And one of the definitions of trauma is too much, too fast, too soon, right? And so all of us, whether you live in the United States or in any other country globally, with the pandemic, with the racial wars going on in our world, the very necessary healing that needs to come, we also are being asked to speed up more and more and more. And yet the healing vortex actually needs to slow down. Our thinking brain wants to figure everything out, but the biophysiology has its own rate and its own rhythm that is going to oftentimes go in direct counter vortex to that trauma vortex that says, do it now, hurry up, even if you don't know what you're doing or even talking about, go faster, get me out of this. And that makes sense. But the healing vortex actually asks us to do the opposite, which is slow down. So we're going to do a little bit of that today together. So another thing I want to talk about, how we move forward spiritually. Number one, you may be already getting it. Begin to identify what is the healing vortex for you. What is the healing vortex for you? I mentioned some of mine. And begin to, so here you may envision this yin and yang symbol. One side we could imagine as the trauma vortex, which I don't want you to think is the bad one that you need to run away from. Not at all. It's a part of life. And then on the other symbol in the yin and the yang, you have that other side that's the healing vortex. And there's a reason why those two things are perfectly in proportion in that ancient symbol. We need to be focusing as much, if not more, of our attention on the healing vortex than we do the trauma vortex, because the trauma vortex is everywhere you look. The biophysiology of the mind as well is designed to take you to the focal point of the trauma vortex. It's what Steve Hoskinson, one of my teachers, calls the what's wrong attention. How many of you here today can tell me what's wrong in your life? Raise your hand. Right? How many of you focus on what's wrong in your life? How many of you got together with friends and family, whether in person or on Zoom, and you talked about what's wrong in the world? How many? It's all of us, right? It's human nature to focus on what's wrong. But what's so deeply needed for us to move forward spiritually is to actually begin to reinforce, reify, and build our relationship and attentional capacity to this other realm, you guys, and that's the healing vortex. If you're a woman, if you're a man, if you're a child, if you're an elderly person, if you're a white person, if you're a Black person, if you're a brown person, our biology is the same. And in order for us to come out of and through the trauma of our ancestors and the trauma of our recent past and the trauma of last week, we must begin to lean into this healing vortex. There's a reason why your ancestors danced. There's a reason why your ancestors prayed. There is a reason why people traditionally who have been the most oppressed and repressed in this world are the ones that dance and have the best art. It's because that healing vortex, you have no other choice but to lean into it. I would say collectively, globally, we are being asked to move our awareness into the healing vortex. During the medieval times, there was a great Black Plague that hit our planet that was hundreds of thousands of times worse than the current coronavirus. This is not the first time our world has undergone a pandemic. In fact, we had one 100 years ago that was, to this moment, worse than the one that we're in. And in the one I'm referring to in Europe, in the medieval times, so much death, so much destruction had come about that there was what they in that time called the Great Melancholia descended upon the people. Now, the medieval folks called their experience the Great Melancholia. Currently, we call it depression, right? Rates of anxiety, depression, suicide at an all-time high. And it's just such a heartbreaking thing. And many of you are here who are in that right now, or who have gone through that, or who touch into that, those energetics from time to time. And what I want to say to you as a beacon today is that is a completely rational, relevant, and natural response to what's happening on the planet. Your fear, your anxiety, your depressive experience, those emotions that need to come through are a sign of your health. They're a sign of your health, but we don't want to get stuck there because that's not going to serve you and your purpose on this planet. So what is this healing vortex? The healing vortex often can be accessed through a lot of those things that I mentioned, your pets, your nature, your loving relationships with others. And what we would call that is a co-regulatory response or experience. So I'm having a hard time. I call up on Marie. She commiserates. She tells me that I'm not crazy. And then I feel better, right? This is co-regulation. We can do this with a tree in nature. We can do this with a pet. We can do this with a loved one. But we can also do this with ourselves, and that's called self-regulation. So how do we move forward spiritually? Every single day, put at least 51% of your attention on the healing vortex, if not most of your attention on the healing vortex. Because guess what, my friends? The darkness is going to come up. It's going to rise forward. There's no getting around it. And yet, if I don't have enough of that resiliency, or as Ayurveda calls the ojas, right, the container in which to hold it, it makes this experience of digesting the dark matter that is being vomited up like a cancerous boil on this planet virtually impossible. You are being called, because you signed up for this lecture, to be a good digester, someone who can tap into her or his own inner light and fire so as to transform and transmute our own inner darkness, our own inner narcissist, our own inner racism, our own inner sexism, our own inner codependent, right? All of these buzzwords, to be able to transmute that in ourselves so that, guess what? When we see it coming at us, we've got their number dialed because we've recognized it in ourselves. And therefore, we have better boundaries. So, number one, slow down. Number two, connect to the healing vortex, both self-regulation and co-regulation with others. The next thing I want to talk about, we could say number three, I hadn't planned on giving them numbers, but maybe it'll be helpful, is the importance of healing stories and regenerative narratives. And so if the only thing that you're reading is your social media feed and whatever news media you subscribe to, then you are not subscribing to a healing narrative or a regenerative story. And so we really are being called, and what we're doing here at Ayurveda School is some of the participants in our call right now are in Ayurveda school or have been in, and we every single week are recreating new healing stories and healing narratives. I believe that one of the causes of the collective pain body right now on the planet and the grief that we're feeling is because of this pandemic. So many of the supports, some of them really healthy supports, some of them not so healthy, but they were still supports. All of our supports have been taken away from us. If you go to church, you can't go. If you sang in a choir, you can't do that anymore. One of my friends was telling me about how she would go every single morning before the sunrise to her yoga studio, and she would enter in and see the dark lights and the candles and the incense in the room, and there were these women there, and some of those women she never even spoke to for years, but she just knew where they placed their mats. And as she unrolled her mat, she would look out of the corner of her eye and see this other woman, and they would give each other this knowing gaze of, we're here, right? To enter into this worship ceremony called inhale and exhale. That support's been taken away. And my heart grieves for so many of my yoga teacher sisters and brothers who've had to close studios or can't teach anymore. My fitness sisters and brothers who can't teach their classes. So many of the things that were our supports in our community groups, our meditation groups, even the local bar down the street where maybe you had a drink with someone once a week, all of those supports have almost all been taken since the past March. And so what happens is that there's this lack of that support. It feels as if the roots have been ripped away. And you may say, oh, how sad. But what the ancients say is that we are living in the Kali Yuga, Kali, the goddess of the great destruction, but also she who loves you the most. She takes away all of those supports because the things that we have been leaning into as our father are rotten to the core in some senses. Education upended, medical care upended, our governments upended, our religious institutions upended. And please hear me correctly. That doesn't mean that there aren't wonderful, amazing people in those organizations with their hearts in the right place. But for whatever reason, this time on the planet, all of those systems that our ancestors have leaned into, we are now beginning to question. There is a lack of trust like we've never known before. And that feels really terrible. And yet what Kali, who is the goddess of destruction that actually loves us the most, is asking us to do is to get so tuned to the part of us that is not any of those things. To actually put our trust in something that is eternal. The teachings of yoga say, you are bigger than all of these micro identifications. And yet those identifications are also really important, especially if you've never acknowledged them before. So we've sort of all gone through and are living through, and hopefully, who knows, the worst could be over, but we're living through a sort of socio-cultural, even medical apocalypse. Now, I don't mean to be hyperbolic. If you know the actual meaning of that term, it completely rings true. The meaning of apocalypse is that which removes the thing that's blocking the light. That which removes the veils, right? And so it's very normal to feel a certain vulnerability and fragility in this moment in time. And yet remembering what all of these perennial mystical and spiritual traditions continually remind us over and over and over again, whether it be through reading the Bible or practicing a Sanskrit mantra, the meaning is always the same. You are not this limited experience. There is a spirit that lives in you that is living in every rock and every tree and every fish and every human being. And that spirit imbues all of life. And that spirit is indestructible. In the tantric tradition, of course, and in Ayurveda, we call this prana. Prana is this life force. And when prana is flowing in our bodies and in our hearts, guess what, you guys? We develop something called tejas. And that tejas means a light and a splendor and a radiance. And this is the most important thing I might say this entire lecture. That light and that splendor and radiance has the capacity to melt the bitterness on a broken heart, to melt the anger on a broken heart, to melt the grief on a broken heart, to melt the unforgiveness on a broken heart. That thing has the power to melt you, even though that doesn't mean that you let people get away with shit, right? Or that you decide to break up with someone that's really bad to you, or that you decide not to hang out with certain people, or that you choose to vote in a certain way, or that you choose to be a conscious spirit activist on this planet. It doesn't mean that you don't get out there and fight the good fight, but that you must do it from a place of being melted into love, or your activism will be lame. And it will bring you more deeply into that polarization of othering that will create more violence on this planet. Are you melted into love in your activism? Are you melted into love when you make a comment on someone's Instagram? Are you melted into love when you say something to a family member because you find them offensive? Are you melted into love first? And guys, usually the answer is no. We exist in a reactive universe. And so to actually stop, and for me, this is my daily practice, and to pause and to remember whose child I am and who has got my back, and to fill my heart with light and forgiveness, and to then respond is the deepest spiritual practice of all. I remember one of my yoga teachers saying, the definition of pranayama is to figure out everyone you've kicked out of your heart. Now, again, this doesn't mean you hang out with these people or that we ever condone abuse or injustice or racism or sexism. We never condone it, and we fight forever against it. And yet, what is this realm in me of the vertical? You've seen this image of the Christian cross. We have a similar image, many in the Hindu and tantric traditions of the yantras. We have the symbol of the Star of David, the up and downward facing triangle coming together to meet in the middle, and where they meet is here. How can I have a relationship in the horizontal plane? And that's you, my animals, my boss, the world around me. How can I exist in the horizontal if I'm not right in the vertical? The earth is below me, the sky is above me, and may I be this channel somewhere between the wildness of an animal and the infinite beatitude of a God. That's called being human. And if you're not in right relationship with the God of your own heart and the Earth Mother, all of our works in that horizontal plane are going to become less fruitful, if not even harmful. The teachings of Ayurveda and Tantra say that prana cannot flow through hatred and tension. What is the story that I'm living by is the question we have to ask ourselves if we're going to move forward spiritually. What is the narrative that I'm believing in? What is the narrative I'm telling myself? What is the community narrative of the people that I choose to spend my time with? What is the narrative? The Buddha said that during this time, the guru will be the sangha. The guru, the teacher, the one who guides us into the light, is going to be the sangha. And sangha is a Sanskrit word that means the people you hang out with, right? And maybe we could even translate that onto the social media world. Whoever you follow is going to become what you think about and what you believe in. In the Christian tradition, in Hebrews 10:24, the verse says, "Let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works." Let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works. It doesn't say, let us consider the people that have the same political ideology as we do and then love them. It doesn't say, let us consider the people that live in our neighborhood and that kind of are like of our same mindset and love, and through that good works will come to and from them. It doesn't say that. It says, let us consider one another. That means the everyone, in order to stir up love and good works. And so, how are you considering others? I want to read a poem by the poet Naomi Shihab, and I may not be pronouncing that right. And she really gives such a beautiful and colorful language to this idea from Hebrews of considering one another. This poem: before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment, like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go, so that you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers eating their maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you, how he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to gaze at bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, it is I you have been looking for. And then goes with you everywhere, like a shadow or a friend. Kindness. I love that poem because she speaks so clearly to the trauma vortex and the healing vortex of kindness. So there's so many more things that I long to say, but what I really want to impress upon us as we begin to make our way towards the end of this little lecture and into a practice of the heart is that the distillation of all of the teachings that I've ever studied my entire life, and I've really dedicated my life to studying these things, not only in the Tantric, Ayurvedic, and Christian traditions, but so many mystical traditions over and over and over distill everything into one thing, and that is observe with kindness. Whether it be yourself or other people, observe, hold presence, and in that presence, let go of the expectation and let whatever arises within the field of that observation be held in the blanket of love. If we can't remember that, guys, we're screwed. But guess what? I believe in you guys and I believe in myself. And having been the head teacher of a school that has hundreds of people that have come through it, I believe in the student body. I believe in the people that sign up for Ayurveda school. Omri, who's also on the call, is the operations manager here at Shakti School. And she can tell you, over and over again, we see that actually what's happening is that there are people on the planet who long for love and who long to learn how to love themselves. In that vein, I'm going to leave us with one final experience, and that is the experience of the heart. So go ahead and take a break from the mind. If you want to lay down, you certainly may. You can lean back on your sofa. Maybe some of you are already in that position. You can certainly be like me. I'm just sitting with my spine tall. Remember that there are two, as you close your eyes, there are two relationships going on right now. One is that as you begin to close your eyes and focus on your own embodied experience, the part of your brain that is, one could say the prefrontal cortex, one could say that is the site of your good inner parent. I know that no one here had the perfect mom. I know that no one here had the perfect dad. And some of you had ones that we could even say were really bad. But we have this part of our brain that God gave us that has the ability to be logical and rational. It has the ability to name things. It has the ability to hold presence. The yogis called it the third eye, the prefrontal cortex. And this whole host of capacities of this I command, Ajna Chakra center. We could think of it as this great, great inner father. And just sense into that part of your brain, that prefrontal cortex, even letting the awareness localize itself there and collect and gather there at the midbrain, forehead. And let yourself soften into a willingness and let prayer be a part of your life. Oh, great inner Father, be with me, be with me, be with me. Help me parent myself in all the ways that the best father would. And that relationship of you as the individual to all of these broken and crazy parts of yourself, all of these wounded inner children, and all these scared parts and angry parts. You begin to invite them into the experience and hold them as a good father would. And then the great mother below, and sense in your own body, your belly and your pelvic floor, in this belly space of that loving mother that can hold a baby in her womb. And if you're a man, you also have this on the spirit level. Feel that mothering, that inner mothering, that good parenting of nurturance and warmth and darkness. And so feel there's the individual of you. We can call this the micro relationship of your own capacity to be a good parent to you and all your myriad parts. And whatever prayer wants to come through, oh, let that inner parent, that good father of my prefrontal cortex and that good mother of my belly space, my sexual organs, my womb space, let that good mother and good father come together in that space of my heart where all my inner capacities meet. And then we go from there to the macro. And here is where we become spiritual beings. Feel that you, whatever your name is, I'm seeing Claire and Allison, Maria, Matea, just your own name, that individual. I call myself Katie right now in this lifetime, that this little tiny, tiny, insignificant speck of a person could be held in something bigger than you and bigger than your individual capacities. In the tradition, we call this Ishvara Pranidhanani Kriya Yogaha. There is a part of me that knows how to surrender to that which is so much bigger than me. Feel the crown of the head opening, the base of the pelvis opening down, down, down. And feel yourself starting to receive that light of the cosmic Father in the Christian tradition, God the Father. This is so important for us, especially as not only women, but men as well, that so many of us lacking this integrity of fatherhood. Letting our individuality be penetrated by that loving, pure light of solar consciousness, Father, Father, Sky. Purify us. Let that solar radiant light, and you can even visualize this golden rays of the sun opening up the crown and saying to yourself in whatever language feels authentic to you, you say, oh, great light, dissolve in me anything that would be preventing me from seeing the world as light, from seeing myself as anything other than your holy child. Whatever your background, whatever your tradition, maybe you don't even like that word God, it's okay. Let that light of presence in. It needs no name. But if you do have a tradition that you work in, allies, ancestors, positive healing light, gods or goddesses, this is the time to let your individual body be surrounded by this matrix of support, the healing vortex that is always available to you. And from below, feel that anchor dropping down, down, down into the belly of the mother, that dark energy whose core is red and hot like lava, great mother below, ferociously kind one, wild one. She who eternally recreates herself, that regenerative, pleasurable, and even destructive at times, force. Feel that natural world. May there be healing and balance. Feel that great mother force from below, moving up your legs and into your pelvis like a red volcano erupting at your navel center. Oh, great mother, anything in me that I haven't been able to digest, take your red light. Electrify me with that red heat, that lava, that transmutative, transformative force that can melt me, restore me, and feel that red and that golden white moving up and moving down you and meeting in the belly and the heart. In Ayurveda, we understand that the things that are the hardest for us, the things that are our life's greatest challenges, the things that make us sick, the things that give us grief, the experiences in our life that may have been completely wrong, are also the things that our heart has the capacity, that fire of the heart belly has the capacity to use as transformative fuel for the growth of something in you and in our world called compassion. What is the new healing narrative that this group of 200 plus people and the thousands that signed up for this workshop, what is the new healing narrative that will serve our communities? What is the new healing narrative that is not polarizing, but healing? What is the new healing narrative that is unifying? What is the new healing narrative in our own hearts? My relationship, me to all my parts, me to my family, me to my community, my city, my country, and this planet. What is the new healing narrative that will enable you to move forward spiritually? And when you're ready, you can slowly start to open your eyes, maybe take a moment to let your gaze look around the room. And I'm curious, maybe in the text box, I know we've been on a journey together just now, but what is the new healing narrative that maybe you got a download on for your own path, or for your family's path, or your community's path, or your country's path, or the global path? What are these healing narratives? And if you guys would share them in the text box, it'll be great, because we can just get this flow of healing narrative. When the body feels safe, it will run towards the light. When the bodies feel safe on this planet, they will run towards the light. When bodies don't feel safe, it's so much easier to fall into darkness, and it really hurts ourselves more than anyone else. So some of the things coming through from Erica: patience will give you calm. Michelle says, be the change you wish to see. Chelsea, do everything with love, even in the midst of hurt, pain, and eagerness to be seen and heard. Heidi, now we experience pain and joy as a collective as well as individuals. Tanya, I am an act from love and compassion. Devin is saying it's to listen, learn, and teach. Evie, I don't know if I'm saying that right. Oneness. Robert, the logic is undeniable. Maggie, allowed to respond, don't react. Philippa, I felt my narrative really focus on the great father and great mother nurturing me and how to use that guidance to parent me. Really good. Callum, I'm so glad. Be present and hold space so love can flow. Susan, I am thine and myself. Stephania, we are all walking each other home. There is no us versus them. Leah, slow down and share the light, the love, the darkness. Yeah. So I've got seeing like 25 new messages. I won't read all of them, but I really feel you guys, and I'm really grateful that we've had this time together to tap in a little bit to that healing vortex. And yeah, Kaylee is saying, I'm just at the last comment, and I know many of you had many beautiful things to say that I will read at the end of this. But Kaylee, tapping into the healing vortex when I'm stuck in the shadow, and it just reminds me of one more thing that I want to remind us about. The trauma vortex is very seductive, you guys. It is very compelling. When we aren't okay, our tendency is going to be to focus on what's wrong and to take our minds to that, whether it be our emotional pain or our mental pain or our physical pain or our energetic pain, but to actually build the muscle of what's right is the most radical spiritual act on the planet right now. So I personally, my morning practice is to listen to a lot of beautiful Black women singing gospel music and to pray to Christ and to feel the love of Christ, who is my personal deity, move through my body, and to ask that force to be with me. And that's just my personal practice. I work with mantras as well, but my main practice is to get myself into the vortex of something that does not have my problems and that doesn't have my country's problems and doesn't have my race's problems, and to steep myself like a tea bag in that so that I can even deal with those other things. So the last thing I want to say to all of you who I can sense this group so fully, because it's always the kind of people that are attracted to Shakti school. When you spend a good amount of your time, and you've done that the past hour, soaking in the light, whether it be the light of the up or the light of the down, you are going to be a fat, juicy, spiritual sheep full of light. And guess what? There are a lot of wolves out there that will be happy to take a bite out of your flesh. So this isn't about being all love and light, okay? This is to have excellent sense of a sharp sword, and to really be able to discern who's willing of being able to sit in this light with me, and surround yourself with those people. So there's a million more things we could talk about, guys, but guess what? That's why you have to join Shakti School 21? Yes, 2021. So thank you guys so much for spending some time soaking, hopefully, in some light and letting some things move. And I hope to see you in January. And if you're in Shakti School, see you very soon. Thank you, guys.
फूटे फूल अपन सुखे फूटे फूल